After 2 years of conflict in Gaza, a ceasefire deal is giving new hope to end the suffering. Israel and Hamas have agreed to the first phase of a peace plan that would see the return of the remaining hostages and the release of about 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. The announcement was greeted by celebrations in Tel Aviv, and after meeting for several hours on Thursday, the Israeli government voted in favor of the plan. Meanwhile, there are hopes in Gaza that the conflict, which has claimed more than 67,000 Palestinian lives, could now be moving closer to an end. We begin with this report from Rami Al-Magari in Gaza.
The Palestinians here in the Gaza Strip, 2 million residents, welcome this agreement that has been long awaited very cheerfully. Many of them have expressed hopes that this war will come to an end and their suffering that they have been enduring over 2 consecutive years of a devastating, unprecedented war will come to an end, particularly the forcible displacement of the Palestinian population in different regions. And throughout the past 2 years, particularly the last forcible displacement from Gaza City, where 500,000 Palestinians have been forcibly displaced from Gaza into southern and central parts of the Gaza Strip, actually for the past several weeks. These Palestinian population are waiting eagerly to go back to their homes from which they were displaced, actually, and also the Palestinian population are looking forward to the moment that their economic situation is improved, particularly the aid supplies, the goods and commodities that have been scarce over the past period of time. They're expecting the truckloads to enter the Gaza Strip in the next 24 hours after Israel ratifies, Israeli cabinet and Knesset ratify the initial deal between Hamas and Israel. Though the some Palestinians are pessimistic, are skeptical towards the implementation of the agreement, especially the second phase after the release of Israeli hostages expected next Sunday and next Monday, because of what they believe is the complicities and the complications underlined in those negotiations between Israel and Hamas via mediations. Let's not forget that over the past hours, there have been some kind of strikes and bombardments by the Israeli forces, particularly across Gaza City.
And that was Rami Al-Magari reporting from Gaza. Now, for more perspectives, joining me is Dan Arbell. He's a veteran of the Israeli Foreign Service and currently scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University. And with us is Edmund Ghareeb. He is an academic and Middle East scholar. And joining the discussion too is Joshua Landis. He is director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. Welcome to all of you. Dan Arbell, great to have you with us, Dan. So let's start with the latest news. The Israeli government has approved the first phase of this deal, which involves the release of the hostages and the release of Palestinian prisoners, just under 2,000 of them. Now, President Trump is taking much of the credit for what has transpired so far. Let's listen to some of what the president said at a cabinet meeting on Thursday. Let's watch.
We ended the war in Gaza and really, on a much bigger basis, created peace. And I think it's going to be a lasting peace, hopefully an everlasting peace. Peace in the Middle East. We secured the release of all of the remaining hostages, and they should be released on Monday or Tuesday.
So, Dan, this is being referred to as the first phase of this 20-point plan that was released a few days ago. Things have moved very quickly. What's your reaction to these developments?
Well, I welcome these developments. I think that it's a very positive first phase, and but the proof is in the pudding, or the implementation will tell us whether this is going forward as planned. For Israelis, it's a celebration that the 48 hostages, 20 of them live hostages, will be returning after 2 years. For the Palestinians, it's also a win in terms of getting 2,000 prisoners out of them, 250 really that have been serving life sentences in Israeli prisons. So that's also something substantive. And this is all in the first phase, but the other parts of the plan are yet to be. First of all, we don't know all the details, but according to what we do know is the next phases involve Hamas disarming in some fashion, some demilitarization of the of the Gaza Strip, some further Israeli withdrawal back into Israeli territory. And all this will take time. And certainly Trump has to orchestrate this, choreograph this, the Trump administration. And a lot will depend on, if any of the parties will try and spoil this. So far, so good. And one has to remain hopeful. But a lot depends on the next few days and how things play out.
Right, Dan, you mentioned implementation. There could be challenges there. What are your concerns?
So again, first of all, as your correspondent has said, in 24 hours, a ceasefire officially will kick in. Question is, will it be maintained? Will Hamas keep the ceasefire? Will Israel adhere to the ceasefire? That's the first step. Will the hostages be returned? Will prisoners be released by Israel? Will the IDF withdraw to the lines that Israel agreed to withdraw to, according to Trump's plan? All that just in the initial first phase. Then there are other issues that need to enable, for this to happen, we need, for the second phase to happen, we need the first phase to succeed.
Right.
And there, how do you disarm Hamas? How do you demilitarize Gaza?
Yeah.
And so on. So there are many complexities, many fine details that need to be fine-tuned and worked out, and we're not there yet.
Okay, and joining us now is Khalil Jahshan. He is the Executive Director of the Arab Center right here in Washington, D.C. Khalil, good to see you as well. So we just heard, Khalil, in the last hour or two that the Israeli cabinet has approved this deal.
Yes.
And we will see what happens next. What are your thoughts on the agreements?
The problem with this agreement is with the missing detail. Unfortunately, this is not a framework for peace as much as a list, let's say, list of wishful thinking that is missing the traditional detail that we see in, in diplomatically, if you will, devised plans for solving a conflict as entrenched as the Arab-Israeli conflict, or specifically the war in Gaza. When you look at the 20 points, frankly, they leave much to be desired, particularly, as Dan said, in terms of the assurance of implementation. They are not interlinked with each other. There is no time schedule associated with each one. There are no clear guarantees as to what happens if, and therefore, a lot is left to the unknown here, and that's not a good sign. It's good that things are moving with regards to phase one, and phase one is essentially dealing with items 1 through 5 or 6 almost. But the problem is with the rest. As far as the Palestinian perspective is concerned, and my personal concern is really with item 19 and 20. I could care less about the jargon, the diplomatic fluff, if you will, between item 1 and item 20. The concern is what do we mean by basically establishing a political horizon? And is there a guarantee that we can get to that? That is absent from this plan.
Right. Joshua Landis, as we heard from the other panelists right now, much will depend on what happens after the hostages return, after the Palestinian prisoners are released. What do you see as the major obstacles ahead?
Well, Hamas is supposed to lay down their arms, and Hamas leaders have said they want to keep their sidearms and their personal arms. They will give up their heavy weapons. That hasn't been cleared up. Who's going to distribute the aid that comes in? Will there be, Palestinians? Will they be ruling themselves, or will Israel be ruling them? These are all questions that haven't been hammered out today, and who ultimately is going to rule over the region. How do you get Israel to withdraw from all of Gaza? That's what Hamas has demanded in the past. And so far, it's not clear that Israel is going to draw from the whole thing. The first phase is 50%, but the second 50% is going to be the hard part. So all of these are stumbling blocks. It's going to require that President Trump remain very engaged at each step, that he continues to use his influence, which is considerable, but he has to really keep focused on this, and that's going to be the hard part.
Right, Joshua, in terms of, who would be distributing food, who would be distributing other aid, including medical supplies as well, there have been some reports that the United Nations could be getting involved in this. Do you see that happening?
That's important. It's important the United Nations, gets involved, but somebody has to supply security, because as we've seen, people are extremely hungry.
Right.
There are also various groups, some of them armed, that are not Hamas, and there have been attacks on these food convoys. This is 2 million people who are starving. You're not going to have an orderly society. They need a government, and they need a police force. Right. Who is going to provide that?
Edmund, Ghareeb, we have been here before. There was a ceasefire which was agreed to in January. Israel violated that ceasefire in March because it said that Hamas had rejected proposals to extend the truce as well as release more hostages. So what's different this time? Will it work this time?
Well, the last time, even then, it was actually the Israeli government which backed away from the agreement. But for now, I think there's no doubt, this is a very significant development. It is in some ways a breakthrough. We are seeing, for example, the release of prisoners, hostages, whatever you want to call them, from both sides. There's going to be about 20, I think, who are still alive, Israelis, and there are probably about 250, and then maybe they will hear about 1,750 additional Palestinian prisoners. So that is an important development. If we see a ceasefire, the people of Gaza have been going through hell. So basically, I think this is a very important step. Nevertheless, as some of our colleagues have said, that what we have seen so far is not likely in itself to solve the problem. The first phase is very important, very significant. I think this is an important step, but I think we have to wait and see what happens next, what's going to happen with the issue, a number of issues, whether it is, for example, Israel still insisting they want to stay within Gaza, although there's agreement apparently, or there's some reporting which says they might withdraw from about 70% of Gaza for a while. Yeah. And so we'll have to wait and see that. What happens if, for example, Israel decides after getting the hostages and saying that Hamas has not surrendered its weapons, and then they begin attacks again? That's another major issue. Yeah. Who's going to be running the show? Is it going to be, again, this special committee, first of all, of Palestinians, a group of Palestinian technocrats who are going to be supervised by an international committee? President Trump will be the head of it. Blair is going to play a big role in there. And of course, we still remember what Blair's role in Iraq. The other thing that I think is very important here is, I think first and most fundamentally, is the question of legitimacy and local ownership. The Palestinians have been seeking self-determination, and this is a just right under international law, under the UN Charter. It's fundamental desire of the Palestinian people, and they want to build their own societies. So the imposition of governance by outsiders is going to be a big problem also.
Right. Let me get Dan's view on some of those important points that you raised earlier in your response there, Edmund Ghareeb. Dan, at this stage, does Israel basically reserve the right to resume the onslaught on Gaza if those other conditions are not met? Things like Hamas disarming, Hamas demobilizing as well, and dismantling whatever structures it has in Gaza.
So, according to what we've heard so far, and according to reports, and I haven't seen anything else to suggest otherwise, then pretty much it seems to be that Israel cannot go back to fighting, or at least will not go back to fighting, according to the assurances provided to Hamas by the mediators, by Qatar, by Turkey, by Egypt, and also with the strong vow by the United States not to allow the war to continue. Basically, it's not stated specifically, but it implies that Israel cannot go back just like that to fight, unless it has the U.S.'s backing.
Yeah.
And that may be the case if the U.S. will decide that Israel is right to, pursue, go back and fight. Then I think that, that'll happen. But right now, there's no indication that that's the case.
Right. And Dan, as far as Prime Minister Netanyahu is concerned, he's adopted a very hard line on this all throughout this conflict. He has been very intransigent. He's not been prepared to make any kinds of concessions. But now he has. Is this going to be seen in some way as a military and a political defeat for him?
Look, he's trying to play it like it's his plan, and that he succeeded, and it's a victory for Israel's for what he was persistent, was stuck, continued pushing this line. But those who know the details, and a lot of people do get the impression, or are very much aware that without strong pressure by Donald Trump, he would not have come this far. And this could have been a deal could have been struck a year ago, 6 months ago. Unfortunately, Netanyahu dragged his feet. Hamas was also stubborn at different points in time, but without Trump's push, then Netanyahu would not have come thus far. And so he's right now it's a battle of narratives, and he's trying to show he basically won and his way won. But a lot of Israelis are aware that basically, without being dragged to it, he wouldn't have come this far.
Khalil, Jahshan, how will this impact the Palestinian resistance? I mean, is Hamas going to have some kind of elevated status now, seeing how things have turned out?
Symbolically, it would. I mean, the fact that, Hamas has been resisting the massive force used by Israel for 2 years. In the past, frankly, several Arab countries were not able to do that for a week. So, yes, I would say so. However, how long will that last? I mean, we are on the verge of dealing with additional points in this so-called agreement that basically deprives Hamas of any role at all in the governance of Gaza. Is this an agreement, quote unquote, that's supposed to emancipate and give freedom to the Palestinians, or to rule them by outside force, in the sense that if Hamas is not supposed to be involved in governance, basically that is going to be left to the International Stabilization Force, the ISF. Should the IDF not withdraw, is the ISF, the international force headed by the US, will that be willing to clash with the IDF? That is impossible to even think about.
Right.
And there are many other points like this. Hamas, by the way, is not a foreign entity in the sense that it enjoys the support of at least 30% of the population in Gaza. Give or take a few numbers here and there because of these current circumstances, but still, some form of Hamas participation to win the legitimacy and the support of the population of Gaza will be needed.
Just one other point, Khalil. It's a point that Joshua Landis raised a moment ago, and that is, this is a territory that's been demolished. 90% of everything has just been razed to the ground, including hospitals, homes, all kinds of infrastructure damaged. There's starvation there as well. And as Joshua Landis was posing the question, who is going to distribute food, other aid in the territory right now? I mean, the United Nations does have the means to do that, but there's also a question of security.
You're right. It's a very good question, and I'm glad it was raised because, frankly, it's specified in these points, in the 20 points. I think point 8 mentioned very clearly that the distribution of the aid in the Gaza Strip will proceed without any interference from any of the existing parties, and gives basically the United Nations agencies and the Red Crescent, more importantly, a role in the distribution. Will they be allowed to do so? And particularly with the U.S. adherence, but this administration has formed its own NGO, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, that has caused havoc in Gaza and opposed actually UN participation and replaced it. So does that mean the GHF is off?
Yeah.
Our ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, said, well, that's not necessarily so. The agreement does not negate the role of the GHF. Yeah. But if it's staying, that's going to create some problems. And the same thing with regards to construction. We're talking about bringing in experts under the Board of Peace that's headed by Mr. Trump and Tony Blair, with a group of insignificant technocrats on the Palestinian side. Okay. Nobody knows how to rebuild Gaza except the people of Gaza. Yeah. They have done it before several times. They can do it again, but they have to be empowered and given the opportunity to do so.
Joshua Landis, President Trump has staked much on this. In fact, it's something of a personal campaign for him. We are hearing that he will be traveling to the region. He will be traveling there for some kind of signing ceremony. We don't have too many details on that. But what does that add to this process? Does it give you more confidence that it will hold, that it will be implemented?
Well, I think it is very important because America has tremendous authority in the region and in the Arab-Israeli conflict, and particularly with Israel. It's the only country that really has authority with Israel, and it has refused to really pressure Netanyahu until what seems to be now. On the other hand, we have to admit that Trump has allowed Netanyahu to really pulverize Gaza and to continue to the point where Hamas has nothing left, really. There are a few people who left alive, but they don't hold anything anymore. And that's, it is a defeat. And Netanyahu said, we have defeated, we've accomplished total victory. Now, of course, it's not entirely total. There's a few percent that's left, and that could become a real stumbling block in the future. And we saw already several of the right-wing ministers in Netanyahu's government said, we have retained, there's nowhere in the agreement that says we cannot use force in the future if Hamas doesn't lay down its guns, and if, a long list of things saying we retain the right to go back to war if a set of things are not fulfilled. So the fact that this is only step one really leaves a lot of landmines out there for the future. And that's going to require, as you say, Donald Trump to really own this process and believe that it's his, that he has to keep the pressure on.
Right, Edmund, Ghareeb, we've just got a little bit of time left, so I'd be grateful if you could keep your answers short. I know, as we just heard, Gaza has been razed to the ground. In 2 years, Israel has dropped 200,000 tons of bombs on the enclave. In fact, back in April, that was several months ago, a researcher at the University of Bradford in the United Kingdom said to look at the scale of the Israeli attack, it was equivalent to more than 6 Hiroshimas. So the question does rise, who will rebuild Gaza? Who will pay for it? Do you see countries, for instance, like Saudi Arabia or Qatar stepping up into this to rebuild the territory?
I think the countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and maybe other members of the UN, so Europeans, maybe other countries as well would be willing to contribute. The question is, who's going to be running Gaza at the time? I mean, if it appears, and what about the force that we have been hearing about, the military force that's going to be composed, some people say, of even US troops, some US troops, as well as some Arab and Islamic troops as well. Will the Arab countries or Muslim countries, will they participate, especially if it appears that they are working together hand in hand with the Israelis at the same time that we're seeing a rise in the anger in the streets of the region and on a worldwide level as a whole. So that's another issue. The question, I think there are some positive developments. One thing is what's going to happen inside Israel. Netanyahu so far says, as we heard earlier, he seems to be saying this is a victory for him. But at the same time, there are also a lot of opponents, the right wing, but he may be getting support from his critics, the other parties who want to see an end to the conflict. So that's one thing. How about President Trump? I mean, in a sense, President Trump is facing a lot of internal problems, both domestically. Here, he's facing, for the first time, the Republicans are criticizing his policies. They're questioning what he has done so far. They said, you told we're going to put the U.S. first. And then you have the international standing. Yes, they can not necessarily pressure Israel, but the U.S. is probably going to be the main.
We're going to have to leave it there. We have run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for another edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.